Ow, my elbows. Another week at home means another challenge. What's up everybody, Greg here with Lensprotogo and Lens Rentals, and last week we started a brand new challenge series here on the channel, and I challenged you guys to shoot using a TV as a backdrop, and we got some amazing submissions, and I do a whole video where I react to all of your photos and videos, and I'll throw a link to that right up here. In this week's challenge, we're gonna be doing a stop motion video. Now the rules are simple. All you have to do is shoot a stop motion clip similar to the ones that you saw at the beginning of this video. All you have to do when you post them is tag @Lensprotogo, as well as using the hashtag #LensProtogoAtHome. That way we can find them and share them, and we'll be able to see them for next week's episode. If you want a chance to get them seen in the next video, make sure you submit them by April 16th, which is next Thursday. If you want to learn how I created all of these stop motion videos, definitely stick around for this one because I have some great tips and tricks to share with you as I go through the process. Now let's get into it. All right, so we're getting set up here with our first setup as the drone sort of builds itself for one of the shots that you just saw. And the first tip that I have for you is use constant lighting. So here I'm using a studio light. I have a 2x2 panel that I'm using to light my subject, and then I have another light on the ground kind of giving the background gradient. But you don't want to use something that's going to be changing and fluctuating throughout the shoot. Stop motion takes a long time, so if you're trying to use like sunlight, it's going to shift as you go through your stop motion. So you definitely want to have it in a controlled environment. The next thing after you get your light set up is you want to get all your camera settings set up and take a couple test shots. So we're going to go in here and change a couple of these settings to get our exposure dialed in and get our focus locked. So I'm going to go in here, slow down my shutter speed to about a 50th, we'll open wide open to a 2.8, and then I'm going to zoom out a little bit just to fit more of the drone in there. And that goes a little bit into the third tip that I have for you, is really focus on your composition. One of the things that you're gonna have to do is have your end frame, especially because we're building something here, so it's gonna get bigger as we go along. You wanna make sure that everything can fit inside that final frame. So we're gonna go a little bit wider even, and we can have a little bit of room to play around with it in post. We can kind of crop in and move around to fake some camera moves. And then the last thing, after we have our composition, sort of what our final frame is gonna look like, we have our camera settings set up and locked, is we wanna set up some sort of monitor if you have one. This is gonna make it a lot easier to actually see where your frame is as you're moving your composition and moving your objects around in the frame. So I have this little one set up here that I'm gonna be using, and that's just going HDMI into the Sony a7 III. I also have all of the props that I'm going to be using for the stop motion laid out on the table. So I have propellers, I have all the tools, batteries, the GoPro, the drone itself, and having it laid out is just going to keep it much more organized and make the process of shooting the stop motion much easier. Now when it comes to actually moving the objects throughout the frame, you want to keep your movements very, very small. The smaller the movements are in between each frame, the smoother the motion is going to be in the final result. If you take some big leaps in between each spot, it's going to move it that much faster throughout the frame. The next tip to help with some movements of your objects, especially if you're going to start leaning them and tipping them up on other things, is to use some of these rubber pads or rubber bands. These are going to help stop the object from sliding, especially if you're on a slick surface. And you can just place these directly underneath them as you're leaning up on whatever your object is, and that's going to help stop it from sliding down and falling. What you really want to try and do is hide it as much as you can behind the object so that it's not visible to your camera that you're taking the pictures with. You can get it out in post, but it does take a little bit more work to do that. The next tip that I have kind of goes back to the first one that I talked about, which is not bumping your tripod and your camera. It's super important not to do this because if you bump it during the middle of your stop motion, you're going to get some bumpy frames and it's going to make your footage not look very good. Now there's a couple ways that you can help reduce the risk of bumping your camera and tripod. One of them is using a remote trigger to actually trigger the camera to shutter remotely, or using an app. I have the a7 III, so I'm going to be using the app to go through all of these different settings and to be able to take the photo without having to touch the camera at all. And the last tip that I have for you during the shooting process is give yourself some time. It does take a little bit to sort of get into the flow and get in the rhythm of shooting stop motion, especially when you're first starting out, but it's a really fun and creative way to add some extra different shots in your footage. Now I'm gonna start shooting and get this one all wrapped up, and then we'll head up into the office and I'll show you some of the post-processing workflow for getting all these photos into a video. So now that we've taken all of these photos, we got to turn it into one single video clip, kind of compiling all of them together. And this process is pretty easy. Now on the computer, I'm going to switch over to a screenshot here so you can see exactly what I'm doing. We can go ahead and navigate to all of our photos. Now I shot in JPEG and in RAW. If you wanted to, you can take those RAW files into Lightroom and really do a color grade on it or apply your own preset. Or you can take the JPEGs right into your editing software, either Final Cut or Premiere. I'm going to use Premiere. So I'm going to grab all of the JPEG files, and I've actually done that here already. I've broken them out. So here you can see all of the drone shots as I go down through them, just kind of skipping around. It looks like they're all there. Now there's a couple ways that you can import it into Premiere. So I'm going to open up a new project. So once you have Premiere open, if you go into the project window, you can right click and you can hit import. That'll open up a window where you can navigate to your photos. Challenges, stop motion, drone. You can see I have all of my photos here, all the JPEGs. So I'm going to select all of those and you can hit import. Now this is going to import every photo individually, and sometimes this is good to do it this way. Sometimes you might want to do the image sequence, which is the next thing that I'm going to show you. But right now you have all of these different photos in your project window. If you have them all selected, you can just drag them right onto the timeline and start a sequence, but you might want to adjust the duration of each frame. Currently, as you see it right now, each of these pictures is 2 frames long. So if I just drag this into the timeline, it's going to be twice as long as I really want it to be. So what you can do to fix that is right click on it, go to speed duration, and then under the duration, change it from 2 seconds to 1 second. So you can do 0, 1, hit OK. And now all of these have switched over to be 1 frame long. Now we can take those, drag it into the timeline, drop it in there. You can zoom in, and you can see we have every single individual picture as 1 frame of the stop motion video. And once you have this, you can go in, add an adjustment layer. We'll just drop that right on top, drag it over the whole thing, and this is what you can do your color correction on if you wanted to add some contrast, change the colors around, get it looking the way that you want it to. The other way to import this, if we highlight all these, let's just clear it out, is to go import and then navigate back to that same folder with all those photos, and we're just going to click on the first one. So this one's right here, 7493, that's the first one in this whole sequence. Now if you go down in the bottom left on a Mac, you can hit this options, and then there's this checkbox for an image sequence. If you check that, it's just going to recognize that the rest of the clips or rest of the photos in this folder are part of an image sequence, and we can hit import. This way it's going to import them all, combining them together into one video clip that you can just drag and drop in. And now you have that one clip that you can start editing, do whatever else you need to do, just like you would a video clip. Also play around with keyframing and position of your clip. If you go up into the clip settings here under the motion, you can play around with the scale and the position. And this allows you to do some like slide or pan moves with the camera without actually having to do it while you're shooting. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn on the keyframe button, move these keyframes to the beginning, and then we can slide it all the way over to the side here. We'll leave the scale exactly the same. And then if we play that, it's going to pan right to left just like we would if we were panning a video, but now we have it with the stop motion. And then finally, the last post-processing tip that I'm going to leave you with is add in some subtle sound effects. That's really going to tie this whole thing together and really bring the stop motion to life. All right, that was super fun. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that one. I just wish we had some nicer weather out so I could go fly this thing right now. But I can't wait to see what you guys come up with and what you guys create using this stop motion challenge. Again, make sure to tag us at Lensprotogo and hashtag Lensprotogo@home. If you know anybody else that would be down to try this stop motion challenge, make sure to share this video with them. And if you guys liked it, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and I'll see you right here next week.